Is Bitcoin the biggest scam in history, or is it the best form of money to ever exist? In this video, I want to go through this in depth. Let's get started. The reason why I'm making this video is because I empathize with the people who think that Bitcoin is going nowhere. It's going to go to zero. It has no physical appearance. All of these things, I get it. I completely understand because I came from this place. I came from a place of not understanding what Bitcoin is, not understanding where it could go, and really not understanding how money works. So in this video, I want to address a lot of the points that people make when they say that Bitcoin is a scam. So I made a document here with some points on why Bitcoin is seen as a scam by a lot of people. So the first point that I want to talk about is the association with scams like FTX or Sam Bankman-Fried. So FTX was an exchange that scammed a lot of its customers. It took their wealth away. It basically told them that they have Bitcoin when they actually didn't. It told them that it bought Bitcoin on their behalf, but it actually didn't. It used that Bitcoin to fund its scammy sister company called Alameda. So I get it. People are worried that maybe more scams like FTX or Sam Bankman-Fried will come up. But what you have to understand is that these scams only have power over you if you give them your Bitcoin, if you allow them to control your Bitcoin. If they don't have control over your Bitcoin, they can't do anything. If you have your Bitcoin in self custody, there's nothing that anyone can do to take it from you, nothing that anyone can do to manipulate your Bitcoin, nothing that anybody can do to decrease your percentage ownership of the network. On the other hand, when FTX owns your Bitcoin, of course, they can do whatever they want. They can move your Bitcoin, they can spend your Bitcoin, they can sell your Bitcoin, they can do whatever they want with it. So the association with scams, I think, is pretty unfair because Bitcoin has nothing to do with FTX. Bitcoin is a separate network. FTX sell Bitcoin to people and they take a portion of the amount of Bitcoin that they sell them. So let's say they sell them $1,000 worth of Bitcoin. FTX would have taken 1%, 2%, 3%, whatever their fee is. This is like saying that because Enron exists, the US dollar is a scam. The US dollar is definitely a scam, but it's not a scam because of Enron. The US dollar is a scam because of other reasons. There are other reasons completely separate from Enron. The next point that a lot of people make is that it has no intrinsic value. It's digital, it's not backed by governments, it has no cash flows. I think what you need to understand is that money doesn't need to be physical in order to work. Bitcoin is not a business, so it's not supposed to create cash flow. Bitcoin isn't backed by governments because governments don't create it. It doesn't need to be backed by governments. Bitcoin is completely separate from governments. If anything, governments will use Bitcoin because Bitcoin is the best form of money in the world. Governments don't need to back Bitcoin. Governments don't need to be supportive of Bitcoin for Bitcoin to work. Intrinsic value is value in and of itself. So if something has value in and of itself, then it has intrinsic value. If you can use it for something, then it has intrinsic value. If we look at, let's say, the US dollar, Bitcoin competes with the US dollar. If we look at the US dollar has no intrinsic value either. You can maybe use it to wipe yourself after you go to the washroom. Maybe you can use it to start fires, but the US dollar in and of itself has no intrinsic value. You can't use the US dollar for really anything. You can't use it in industrial production like gold or precious metals. You can't really do anything with it. You can't build things with it. The US dollar is also digital. It doesn't really make any sense to say that because something is digital, it can't be used as money and that it has no intrinsic value. Bitcoin is not supposed to have utility. The US dollar doesn't have utility. Bitcoin is not supposed to have utility. Bitcoin separates utility from money. Today, we're using real estate as money. We're using real estate as a store of value. What you're seeing is that over time, as more and more people adopt real estate as a store of value, the price of housing rises, the price of shelter rises, and the intrinsic value that people claim that real estate has is the problem. What we're seeing is that people are using real estate to generate cash flow. They've turned real estate into a business. So we use real estate as money because it's physical. Governments like it. Governments want to earn property taxes from it. You can get cash flows by renting it out, but that doesn't make real estate good money. Okay, so the next one, volatility and price. It seems speculative and risky because of the volatility, because the price keeps moving up and coming down. A lot of people are going to say this. They're always going to say this. But the reason why there is volatility is because the market doesn't know what Bitcoin is. Most people have no idea where Bitcoin is going. Most people use Bitcoin as a way to get more fiat currencies. But the people who truly understand Bitcoin, they use Bitcoin as an exit from fiat currencies. Eventually, what we're going to see is that people who hold Bitcoin aren't going to want US dollars for their Bitcoin, so the volatility will go away. The volatility will completely go away because at that point, one Bitcoin will equal to one Bitcoin. No matter what you want, you'll be able to pay for it with Bitcoin. People won't want US dollars for their Bitcoin because they'll be able to pay for whatever they want with their Bitcoin instead of US dollars. People think that Bitcoin is speculative, again, because they don't quite understand it. When you understand where Bitcoin is going, when you understand the value of Bitcoin, when you understand the characteristics of money, when you understand that it's the biggest network in the world, you start seeing why it's not speculative. Bitcoin is the least speculative asset in the world, at least in my opinion, because you know what the supply cap will be. You don't know what the demand will be, but you don't know the demand for any asset. You don't know what the demand for real estate will be over the next few years. You don't know what the demand for stocks will be. You also don't know what the demand for Bitcoin is. And I'll give you that. But with Bitcoin, at least you know the supply. You have no idea how many shares will be issued by any company over the next few decades. You have no idea how many houses will be built in a neighborhood over the next few decades. You don't know if we'll have, let's say, 3D printed houses or prefabricated homes or underground homes or condo buildings. None of that is known. So, at least to me, real estate and stocks would be more speculative than Bitcoin because Bitcoin, at least you know the supply, you don't know the demand. But with real estate, you don't know the supply or the demand. With stocks, you don't know what the supply or the demand will be. Same thing with gold. You don't know what the supply or the demand will be. We just assume, we speculate, I think that would be a better word, that people will want gold tomorrow or the next day or the next day after that. We also assume that people will want US dollars tomorrow or the day after or the day after that. The reason why Bitcoin is volatile in price is because the majority of people have no idea what it is. So that's how they trade it. They trade it as a gamble because to them, it's just a way to get more fiat. Most people just see Bitcoin as another asset. When you understand Bitcoin, you understand that it's completely separate from every other asset. And the next point, regulatory uncertainty. People think that because regulators haven't regulated Bitcoin, then it is going nowhere. But the reality is that nobody can regulate Bitcoin. The only people that can regulate Bitcoin are the people who run nodes. If the people who run nodes choose that Bitcoin will work a certain way, then it'll work that way. No government can change Bitcoin. If I own Bitcoin and I lose the private keys, no government can recreate those private keys. If I write my keys on a piece of paper, my seed phrase on a piece of paper, and that piece of paper burns, nobody can recreate those private keys and recreate that Bitcoin. No matter what happens, even if I owe somebody Bitcoin, if I go bankrupt and I owe people money, nobody can recreate that Bitcoin. So the regulatory uncertainty is irrelevant because nobody can regulate Bitcoin. Thinking that Bitcoin isn't working because it can't be regulated is a failure in understanding how Bitcoin works. The next one, privacy and association with illegal activity. First of all, Bitcoin isn't completely private, it's pseudonymous. So you don't know who owns which address, and that makes it more private than, let's say, the US dollar. But it's not as private as people may think. Every transaction can be traced, every wallet can be traced, unless you use something like Lightning or Liquid. In those cases, you can have more privacy, but the base Bitcoin layer is not private. It's public. Anyone can access the transactions in any wallet. As soon as a wallet is associated with you, people will know that you own that Bitcoin. So it's not really private, it is public. And the next one, association with illegal activity. Of course, a lot of people use Bitcoin in illegal activity and crimes. They pay for drugs, they pay for weapons, they pay for hitmen, whatever they want to pay for. And that's not my responsibility. As somebody who's a Bitcoiner, I know that value is what's being transferred here. People will use whatever they want to transfer that value. They can use real estate, they can use gold, they can use stocks, they can use US dollars. Today, criminals use US dollars to transfer value. They use US dollars to pay for drugs. They use US dollars to pay for weapons. Criminals even use the US banking system to launder money. So just this alone shouldn't make you think that Bitcoin is a scam. Because in that case, if you think that Bitcoin is a scam because criminals use it, then the US dollar is a scam as well. Stocks are a scam as well. Cars are a scam because criminals drive cars. Houses are a scam because criminals live in houses. So that means that everything is a scam. Association with illegal activity doesn't mean that it's a scam. It just means that the people who are committing that illegal activity very likely are ahead of the crowd. They've just figured out that Bitcoin works better than the US dollar. And the next one, whales manipulate the price because a small number of people own it. And that makes a lot of sense because most people have no idea what Bitcoin is. Most people still think Bitcoin is a scam. They go through all of these reasons and they just reject Bitcoin. They don't even want to touch it. So that makes a lot of sense. I can't even argue against that. But that doesn't make it a scam because whales manipulate the price doesn't make Bitcoin a scam. They're also manipulating the prices of housing. When I worked as a real estate agent, I know how many people would blindly offer a certain amount of money. They would completely manipulate the price for the entire market, and it wasn't intentional. They were manipulating the price, but they were doing it because they were uneducated. Even the whales that you see manipulating the price, a lot of them probably own a ton of Bitcoin, but they don't truly understand where Bitcoin is going. A lot of people own a lot of Bitcoin and they have no idea where it's going. They have no idea how it works. They have no true understanding of what it can do for the world. So they're selling their Bitcoin, and that's perfectly fine. Manipulating the price just means buying and selling. People think that if the price goes down, it's being manipulated. People think that if the price is going up, it's being manipulated. But no, that's not what it is. That's just how markets work. People buy and sell because they want to give away some of the Bitcoin that they have. The price just changes because people buy and sell. That's really it. It's not whales manipulating the price. It's just supply and demand. That's how markets are supposed to work. Next one, uses too much energy. I read a stat that in the US, clothes dryers use the exact same amount of energy as the Bitcoin network. So, would you say that you shouldn't use clothes dryers because you can just hang your clothes on a rack? Would you say that you shouldn't use clothes dryers and clothes dryers shouldn't exist because they use too much energy? No, you wouldn't. It depends on what the use case of that clothes dryer is to you. You use that clothes dryer because you want to save time. You want to decrease the amount of time that it takes you to do laundry. And that makes complete sense. So if you get to use your dryer because it saves you time, it saves you personal energy, then I get to use Bitcoin for the use case that I deem it to be useful for. I think that Bitcoin is a great way to store value for the future. If anything, Bitcoin helps me to use less energy because it means that in the future, I won't have to work for a company that I don't like, a job that I don't like. At some point, I'll be free to do whatever I want to because I saved in Bitcoin. Bitcoin's use case is as a savings tool. It might use too much energy in your opinion, and that's completely fine. That's your opinion. You can keep that opinion if you want to, but I also want you to think of that for everything else that you do. If you think that Bitcoin uses too much energy, who's to say that your car doesn't use too much energy? Who's to say that your dryer doesn't use too much energy? Who's to say that you have to do everything by hand and you can no longer use, let's say, a vacuum? Maybe charging your vacuum every day uses too much energy. So if you think Bitcoin uses too much energy, think about it from other perspectives of your life as well. If you think that I can't use my Bitcoin because it uses too much energy, well, then you should be able to use your dryer because I think it uses too much energy. Bitcoin is actually great for the environment because Bitcoin uses energy that would have otherwise been wasted. So let's say, for example, when you extract oil from the earth, natural gas is a byproduct of that extraction. So what Bitcoin miners can do now is instead of having to burn that gas and just create methane and destroy the environment, Bitcoin miners can be attached to that source of energy, to that natural gas, and they can convert that energy into Bitcoin. So, what I think is going to happen over time is the people who are extracting oil from the earth are going to find ways to make it more efficient because they can now turn that gas that they would have otherwise had to burn and they would have had to destroy the environment with, they can now turn that into Bitcoin. So why wouldn't they turn it into Bitcoin? It's a choice. They can do it. They will do it. And I think that would be the best use of their time, money, and energy. And then on top of that, Bitcoin is giving them the incentive to do the research and development to make it even more efficient because the more efficient they are, the more profits they make, the better production methods they can think of and create. And this helps the entire economy because Bitcoin mining will lower the cost of producing oil. Because now, instead of just having oil as their source of income and holding US treasuries or holding stocks, they can now hold Bitcoin on their balance sheet and use that as a source of revenue or income. As the Bitcoin price increases, the revenue that they make from their operations also in a way increase. And the next one, transactions are irreversible, no central authority. This is a feature and not a bug. I don't think this is a bad thing. I think this is a really great thing because what it does is it ensures that you pay attention to who you're sending money to. You pay attention to what you're buying. Let's say you're buying something from somewhere across the world and you pay them, they send you whatever they need to send you, and it ends up being different from what you expected it to be. Should that be your fault Or should that be the merchant's fault? I think that should be your fault. You should have done the due diligence to buy what you think is appropriate for your needs. Why should the merchant be punished if you're the one who made the decision to buy whatever it was? Some people will obviously use the legacy system because transactions are reversible. They use the legacy system to scam merchants. And that's not a good thing either. But I don't see people talking about that because most people aren't merchants. Most people are consumers. Most people don't think of things from the merchant's perspective. Then the next one, money in the legacy system can be insured. Bitcoin can't, of course, because in the legacy system, let's say a bank collapses. They've made a ton of stupid decisions. The funds that depositors have kept in that bank will be insured because it can be created out of nothing. We can create more money out of nothing. We can add more money to the system and make those depositors whole again. On the other hand, with Bitcoin, you can't create more Bitcoin out of nothing. If somebody deposits money in a Bitcoin exchange and the Bitcoin exchange goes and gambles with that money and they lose the money, then they won't be able to get that money back. They won't be able to get that Bitcoin back. So how do they make their depositors whole again? What Bitcoin does is it incentivizes the holders to do more due diligence on who they give their Bitcoin to. And I think this is, again, a feature and not a bug. The fact that the money in the legacy system can be insured is just a result of fake money. If we didn't have fake money in the legacy system, then money wouldn't be insured. And the next thing that I want to talk about is why Bitcoin is the best money. Remember, the topic of this video was, is Bitcoin the biggest scam in history or the best money to ever exist? So why is Bitcoin the best money? It has all of the characteristics that we need money to have. And these are the characteristics that money should have. First of all, it needs to be fungible. You need to be able to exchange one unit of currency for another. They have to have the same amount of value. Otherwise, it's extremely difficult to pay for things if you have multiple types of money. Let's say you have diamonds that are 5 carats versus 1 carat. You can't give somebody 5 1 carat diamonds and exchange it for a 5 carat diamond because it's not the same amount of value. The 5 carat diamond will be worth orders of magnitude more than those 5 1 carat diamonds combined. On the other hand, 5 $1 bills and 1 $5 bill are worth exactly the same thing. Same thing with gold. 1 ounce of gold is the same as 28 grams of gold. You can melt those 28 grams of gold and turn it into 1 ounce. Same thing with Bitcoin. One Bitcoin can be split into 100 million units called Satoshis. If you have 100 million Satoshis, you have the same as somebody else who has one Bitcoin. Next one, portable. You want to be able to move your money from one place to another. If you can't move it from one place to another, it's extremely difficult to pay for things with it. Next one, durable. If your money rots, wears, and tears, if it breaks, if something happens to it and it loses its value, then of course you can't use it as a store of value. US dollars are very durable. Gold is very durable. So is Bitcoin. Next one, divisible. You want to look at the ease of divisibility as well as how divisible it is. So the US dollar can be split into 100 pennies. Gold can be split and as much as you want to, but it's extremely difficult to divide. Bitcoin is infinitely divisible and it's easy to divide. So Bitcoin wins in this case. Next one, scarcity. The US dollar is not scarce. Governments can print as much as they want to. Gold is scarce, but you can find more in the earth. You can find more in asteroids. Bitcoin is finite. There's no way to create more of it. Bitcoin will always have a finite supply of 21 million, and nobody can ever change this. The next one, decentralized. Bitcoin is the only one that's truly decentralized out of all of these. Gold is decentralized, but if you want to store it, you have to keep it with someone because of the security, because of the scale. Bitcoin is truly decentralized because you don't need central authorities to hold it for you. You can hold it all on your own. The US dollar is not decentralized. If you have physical dollars, of course, you can pay someone with them and nobody knows that you paid them with it. But the issue is that we all rely on the US government not borrowing too many dollars and adding them to the economy. We rely on the Federal Reserve not creating too many dollars and adding them to the economy. Saleable. Most of the world doesn't accept Bitcoin yet. They do accept US dollars and gold. So Bitcoin is not as saleable as US dollars and gold. But over time, I think more and more people will adopt it and they will understand what it is. So these are the characteristics, and Bitcoin has all of them. And the next one here doesn't need to be backed by governments, and we use digital money today. This is a response to this part here, the no intrinsic value. We already use digital money. The US dollars that we use today, most of them are digital. It's very rare that we touch physical dollars, that we use physical dollars to pay for things. So money doesn't have to be physical for it to work. We already use US dollars and we've already gotten used to it. It also doesn't have to be backed by governments. Gold wasn't backed by governments. Gold has lasted as money for thousands of years. Next one, Bitcoin doesn't have cash flow because it is the cash flow. So if you have a business, you're going to be charging people in Bitcoin. Bitcoin is cash. Just like people could pay you with gold coins before, just like people pay you with US dollars now, they will eventually be able to pay you with Bitcoin. Thinking that Bitcoin is a failure because it doesn't have cash flow shows that you don't quite understand what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is the cash. It's not a real estate property. It's not some kind of business that creates a product. Bitcoin is the money that people will use to value things and to transfer and store value. And the next one, volatility isn't a risk. People think that Bitcoin is extremely risky. It's a scam because it's volatile, because the price keeps moving up and down. But if you look at the trends, if you look at the long-term trends, you're going to notice that Bitcoin's price doesn't move around as much as you think it does. If we take a look at this chart here, we can see that over time, the price does move day to day. It's very volatile day to day, but that doesn't mean that the long-term price is volatile. If you hold Bitcoin for 4 or more years, you're going to see that your purchasing power is always going to go up because Bitcoin has a finite supply. The number of sellers who have Bitcoin and can sell at the current price are always going to run out, meaning that the volatility isn't really a problem. It's more of an emotional issue with people. They think that Bitcoin's price should be stable, but it's never going to be. But this doesn't just apply to Bitcoin, it applies to everything. The price of nothing is stable. Stocks aren't stable. Stocks are extremely volatile. Real estate prices are extremely volatile. If we could somehow day trade houses, I guarantee you that prices would fluctuate 5, 10% every single day. Next one, governments are adopting it. People think that governments aren't adopting Bitcoin, regulatory uncertainty. The US government is setting up a strategic Bitcoin reserve. So the adoption question is pretty much out. It doesn't really make any sense because in 2024, ETFs were approved, Bitcoin ETFs, and in 2025, the US government set up a strategic Bitcoin reserve. And the next one, privacy is a feature and not a bug. I know I mentioned before that it's not truly private, but if you keep your address, if you keep your wallet information to yourself, people won't know that you own that Bitcoin. Why would you want other people to know that you have a certain amount of wealth? You can keep it to yourself, so why wouldn't you? At least with Bitcoin, you have that option. With the US dollar, you don't even have that option. If you keep your US dollars in a bank account, the entire banking system is going to know that you have that there. Next one, a very small number of people understand it. And then, yes, this is in every market. This is referring to the whales that I was mentioning before. Whales manipulate the price, and a very small number of people own it. If a very small number of people understand Bitcoin, then why would a large number of people own it? If there's a very small number of people who own a lot of Bitcoin, then why wouldn't you see whales increasing and decreasing the price whenever they want to? They do that with the legacy system as well. They sell their stocks, they dump them, and then they buy back when the price drops. They do this with every market. This is completely irrelevant to Bitcoin because over time, if you just stack more and more, all you're going to see is that your wealth is going to increase and nobody can take that away from you. This point here is referring to Bitcoin using too much energy, uses too much energy. This is completely subjective in my opinion. It depends on whether or not you understand Bitcoin. If you don't understand Bitcoin, you're always going to think that it uses too much energy. If something isn't of use to you, if you don't understand its use, you're always going to think that it uses too much energy. But then let's look at it from the other side of things. The legacy banking system uses a lot more than just energy. It extracts human labor, time, and energy. It takes our calories and it makes us put them towards this financial system that's designed to steal from us. Think about all the buildings that we have where banks are setting up office, and think about all the people that are working in those buildings to make the current financial system work the way that it does. Without humans, the current financial system wouldn't work. On the other hand, Bitcoin works perfectly fine without human judgment. The next one, transactions aren't supposed to be reversible on the Bitcoin network. The fact that there's no central authority is a good thing because it stops anyone from being able to change how Bitcoin works. Bitcoin is decentralized, meaning nobody can stop it from working the way it's supposed to. Transactions can't be stopped, and scammers can't take their money back once it's given to a merchant. I think a lot of people don't quite understand how credit cards work. Credit cards are allowing you to transfer value to a merchant, but you can cancel that transaction whenever you want to because the transaction doesn't settle for 60, 90, 180 days. So the merchant who gives you whatever they want to sell to you is stuck in limbo. They don't get that final transaction confirmation until a very long time after the transaction happens. With Bitcoin, the transactions aren't reversible, but merchants get their money right away. Merchants also don't have to pay the fees that come with credit cards, so I'm assuming that prices will be much, much lower on a Bitcoin standard compared to what they are today. And the next point here, I mentioned money in the legacy financial system can be insured. A lot of people think that this is a good thing, and this is how Bitcoin should work as well. Money in the legacy system can only be insured because it can be created out of thin air, as I mentioned before. If it can't be created out of thin air, then it wouldn't be insured. If you can't create money out of nothing, then you wouldn't be able to insure the banking system unless there's money already set aside. If you don't set aside a lot of money, then you can't make depositors whole again, and your money really wouldn't be insured. You can give people fiat after it disappears because it can be printed out, but you can't give people more Bitcoin after it disappears because it can't be created out of nothing. So we'll go back to the FTX example. The Bitcoin that FTX had completely disappeared and there was no insurance. You were able to get back $16,000. While right now, the price of one Bitcoin is $83,000. So what happened is they gave back $16,000 or a much, much lower amount of value to their depositors because Bitcoin can't be insured. And that's a good thing because you can't create Bitcoin out of nothing. If something can be insured, if the US dollar can be insured, it just means that there's other people who are getting hurt by insurance payouts. So let's think about what happened during 2008. If there was no fake money, if the US government didn't interfere, if they didn't support all of these financial institutions that were pretty much gambling, then the entire financial system would have collapsed. So the financial system is built on nothing. The insurance that they got, the protections that they got were at the expense of taxpayers. So do you want insurance or do you want a financial system that doesn't tax you when other people gamble with your money? And the next one, Bitcoin is the only fixed supply asset. You don't know how many stocks will exist. You don't know how many real estate properties will exist, but you know exactly how many Bitcoin will exist in 2140, 21 million. That's it. Nobody will be able to create more. Bitcoin is being adopted by banks, governments, and multinational businesses. So they're buying Bitcoin. Even though you might think it's a scam, they're buying Bitcoin and they don't care about what you think. They're going to buy it regardless. Next one, it's the only asset that's fallen 80% three times. I should have said three times and recovered. Nothing else has done this before. This is according to Lynn Alden. She creates some content about this. She was talking about how Bitcoin has fallen 80% multiple times, but it's recovered every single time. You can't say this about the stock market. The stock market, if it falls 80%, I'm guaranteeing you that people are not going to want to buy back in. Next one, it's transparent and easily verifiable. You can easily confirm that you're getting Bitcoin by running a node, by looking at a blockchain explorer. You can see that the Bitcoin that somebody sent you went to your wallet, and you can use your wallet to verify that it's real. You can verify that it's not fake, it's not some random chain. On the other hand, with something like gold, you can't do this. You can't confirm whether the gold that you receive is real unless you have specialized equipment. It also can't be censored. Nobody can stop you from transacting. No government can be stopped from transacting or saving in Bitcoin. It has a strong network with millions of users. There are people all around the world who are running nodes, who are mining for Bitcoin, and they want to continue mining for Bitcoin, and they want Bitcoin because it's the best form of money in the world. After you study Bitcoin, you know that it's not a scam. You know where it's going. You know for a fact that countries are adopting it. You know that it doesn't have to be physical in order to work. This website is called mempool.space. It's a blockchain explorer where you can see every single transaction that's ever happened on the Bitcoin network. Bitcoin is the most transparent form of money. You will never see something like this exist on a fiat standard. This is going to change everything. I truly think that Bitcoin is the best form of money to ever exist and nothing can replace it. Do the research, put in the time and effort. The proof of work is very, very obvious when you've studied Bitcoin. If you haven't studied Bitcoin, you're going to say a lot of things that don't really make any sense. But once you've studied Bitcoin, you know for a fact that this is the best form of money in the world.